Every minute that we live is precious. Every relationship that we have is precious. And we don't have the time to be angry and hateful and resentful and unforgiving. That stuff is all nonsense. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Warrior Podcast. My name is Frank Lardino. Just started podcasting a while ago. This will be the toughest one that I've done, maybe ever. I wanted to talk to you about the journey that my wife Dorothy went on, we went on, and everybody around us. So first, let me start at the beginning. In 2022, my wife had a cancerous mole removed. Went through the processes. She was given a clean bill of health. And then she just became an anti-cancer crusader. She changed her diet. She was on a all juice diet for like 3 months. She was reading about cancer, researching it, and changed her diet, changed her lifestyle, started doing yoga. She wanted to make sure that she was doing everything in her power to make sure that there would never be a recurrence of cancer. It was amazing. My sons and I were like, wow, she just completely revamped her diet like overnight. She did fasting and all these things that have unbelievable health benefits. So, in addition, I want to call out a lady named Beata. She runs a holistic, we'll call it a store or facility in Lamont called Harmony of Nature, in which she implements many time-tested techniques, Chinese medicine. She's a holistic healer, and a lot of people go to her. And Dorothy was going to Beata as well in the time following having the mole removed. So now we'll roll the tape forward to the Friday before Christmas. Dorothy had been having a little bloating in her stomach. She wasn't in any pain. It was just discomfort. She was doing all the holistic things by Harmony of Nature and decided to go see the doctor on Friday morning before Christmas. The doctor felt her abdomen and said, your liver seems to be enlarged and you should probably go get a CAT scan. So we went to the hospital to have a CAT scan, and one thing led to another. And the next thing you know, we're in the hospital for 4 days, and she's got a really bad advanced cancer. Now, we were told that it was metastatic melanoma, which means that skin cancer was circulating inside of her. She had lots of tumors on her lungs and her liver and some other places. So that was it. I mean, we knew what we had to do. And in Dorothy's travels, with the first cancer scare, she had found a place in Tijuana called Hope for Cancer. And she researched it in detail. Like, Hope for Cancer is one of the meccas for holistically fighting cancer, and they had amazing testimonials. So we were going to arrange to go to Hope for Cancer. I think Dorothy was in the hospital for about 4 days. She had been, plucked in so many times that her veins, they couldn't even get into a vein. She was sick of the hospital, and we were too. We wanted to get out of there. We wanted to get to Hope for Cancer. She was starting to bloat in her belly a lot because this was indicative of liver failure, which was a product of the tumors. So we had no misconceptions about, the severity, and we knew that we had to get to Tijuana. Now, the way Hope for Cancer works is you fly into San Diego, and then they pick us up at baggage claim to go to the hospital. So that was our plan. So Dorothy had several days at home before we left for Hope for Cancer. Now, she was in the hospital on Christmas, so we had Christmas on New Year's Day. And then the days that she was home, everybody came to visit her, friends and family. It was such an outpouring of love and such a blessing that she could actually have this. She kept a positive attitude, but she was getting more fatigued as the days passed. And I remember the moment that we first knew. We were in the emergency room, and the doctor had come in after looking at her CAT scans, and he asked a few questions, and then he said, "I have bad news for you." And he said what he said, and Dorothy asked some questions, and I asked some questions, and she took it very calmly. And I told her that too. I said, "You took that very peacefully," and I'm not sure why. I don't know if she had gone through the whole drill of maybe I could die from cancer when she had the melanoma removed in 2022. She never really answered my question when I asked her like why she took it so peacefully. And then the doctor said, "I'm so sorry that I had to be the one to give you the news." And she said, "I'm sorry you're the one that had to give it to me." She apologized for him. And that was amazing. But while we were talking, I was already on with Hope for Cancer. I was registering for a phone call, and so we knew we rolled right into a plan. And Dorothy had some very profound statements in the hospital. She said one time, I didn't want to go before Mom because I wanted to be here for her when it was her time. And she was worried about her grandson, Jack, which, that was her. She was a mom and a nurturer. And she also said, "We're in a fight." And she also said, "You and the boys will get closer," which she didn't have any doubts that she might not be around. So we got all tons of visitors. Thank you for the Pistachios. They brought food, and Dawn brought food. I mean, people were really looking out for us, and it really made a difference. So on New Year's Day, before we even exchanged Christmas presents, because we were going to have our Christmas Day on New Year's Day, as I said, Beata at Harmony of Nature was treating Dorothy every day, and she opened up on New Year's Day specifically for Dorothy. And she spent about 2.5 hours with her. What an amazing lady. I cannot say enough about her, that she would open up her shop just for Dorothy. So we exchanged Christmas gifts, and a bunch of visitors came. And then by the end of the day, Dorothy was tired. Now, she was supposed to pack for Hope for Cancer, and they told us to only pack for 6 or 7 days, even though we were supposed to be there 21 days because they had laundry service. And Dorothy hadn't gone upstairs into our bedroom for several days. We slept in the family room, but she was determined after the guests that she was going to pack. So she wanted to go up the stairs, and she climbed up the stairs literally on all fours, and my son Mike and I were behind her. And when she got to the top of the stairs, she was really tired, and she laid down. And I had laid out all the clothes and everything on the bed. And she's like, "Nope, nope, nope." She kept pointing at stuff, which was her way. And Mike and I had to do a fashion show for her, and what to bring and what to pack. And she had asked for, she said, "Cherie wrote me a letter." Cherie is my daughter-in-law. And I had remembered when we were opening up gifts, one of the gifts had the letter slipped into the seam of one of the gifts. And Dorothy had told me she read that letter, and it was very heartfelt. And I didn't read the letter, but I saw the letter, and I put it in a suitcase already. So she had specifically requested that. After a while, she rested a little bit. She showered. I showered her and bathed her and stuff, and she went to bed. I put the baby monitor on her so I could keep an eye on her because I went downstairs and had things to do. And yeah, ran up there 2 or 3 times to give her some water and soup and things like that. And then we went to bed. The next morning was we were going to be picked up by Jim, who's her brother, my brother-in-law, at 4 a.m. for a 6:20 flight. Jim came a little bit early. Dorothy was motivated. She got down the stairs good. And we walked, as we were walking out to the car, it was Dorothy and I and my 2 sons. And my wife's sister, Ellen, had pulled up with her mom. Dorothy's 93-year-old mom. She came to say goodbye to her daughter. And I couldn't believe the love to do that. Anyway, we got to the airport and got a wheelchair. We wheeled her to the terminal. And a lot of things, my friends, they start lining up where I think there was some divine interaction here. I mean, first of all, I don't know if I've ever taken a Southwest flight that was not full, and this flight was not full. So we were able to get 3 seats in the front aisle, which was perfect because she could lay down if we needed it. We took off. It was a 4-hour flight to San Diego. Dorothy could never get comfortable. I mean, I think the longest she stayed in one spot was 10 minutes, and that was only one time. It was like 3 to 5 minutes. We kept shifting. I'd move on this side of her, that side of her. She'd lean back, lean forward, legs up, legs down, one leg up, one leg down. She just couldn't get comfortable. So at one juncture, it was probably around the halfway point of the flight, I had figured out a way to give her a little comfort when she was leaning forward in her seat, and she would put her head in her hands like this and have her elbows on her knees. I'd kneel in front of her on one knee and like in the marriage proposal position and put my forearm on the top of my thigh, and she would rest on that. And that seemed to give her comfort. So at one juncture, and I'm going to start to give you little tidbits of kindness from strangers, which really was amazing. An older lady, she stopped dead in her tracks as she was walking by, as we were in this position where Dorothy was laying her head on the top of my forearm and thigh. And she said, "Honey, can I do anything for you?" And I said, "No, she's just tired." And she said, "Well, I'll be praying for you both." And she walked away. And the lady across the aisle from us, at first she had asked if we needed any motion sickness pills because she had them. I'm like, "No, she's tired." And then at one time when Dorothy was laying down, this lady had offered her pillow, which I thought was a beautiful thing. So now we're about 2+ hours into the flight, and Dorothy's getting more tired, and I'm kneeling in front of her holding her head, and the flight attendant wrote a little note, and the note said, "Do you need anything?" And it said, do you want the EMTs to meet us at the airport? So I whispered to him, "I'll talk to you in a moment." The flight attendant's name was Kyle, and he was amazing, and he's going to come up in this story a few times. I was able to get out of my seat. Dorothy was leaning up against kind of the sidewall of the plane, and I explained to him our mission. This is what we're here to do. She has advanced cancer. She's really tired. We have to get to the airport in San Diego. They're going to take us to the clinic. That's the mission. He asked if we needed the plane diverted, and I said no. And then he asked me if we should have the EMTs meet us at the airport. And at that juncture, I said, let's just play that one by ear. So some time elapsed, and I realized she was so tired, I didn't even think she was going to be able to stand up and walk to the wheelchair outside the plane. I think it was about at the 3-hour mark. So I got up and I talked to Kyle, the flight attendant, and I said, let's arrange for the paramedics, because at a bare minimum, she's not going to be able to get out of her seat to get to the wheelchair. And I said, in a best case scenario, they can wheel her to the car to take us to Hope for Cancer. And if she perks up and she's like, yeah, let's go. But if she's not in good shape, then we would have to go to the hospital. So time is passing, and we have an hour left or less of the flight. And I'm starting to think about what happens if she goes to the hospital. We didn't have a good experience at the hospital we were at, and I didn't want her to be plucked and prodded, because we knew what her condition was, and they would have put her through that nightmare all over again. So it was concerning to me that this could be an option, and I didn't see any other option. I couldn't think of what else could we do. So we couldn't dial out on our phones on the plane, but we could text. And I'd received a text message from the driver for Hope for Cancer. So my thinking was I would text him to say, please call the doctors at Hope for Cancer and ask them which hospital they recommended, because I wanted us to go to a good hospital in the event that that we needed to do that. So I got up out of my seat, and I was trying to text message, and I wasn't getting a signal. And then Kyle came over, the flight attendant. He handed me his phone. He couldn't get a signal either. And even at one juncture, a passenger, he handed me his phone, and nobody could get a signal. And right at that moment, the pilot announced that they had lost their Wi-Fi and that they were resetting the system. So the flight attendant walked away, and I stood there kind of futzing with my phone, and I heard a thug, and Dorothy hit the floor. She fell out of her seat, and she was out. I grabbed her, I put her back in her, I laid her across the seats, and I did see a little bit of brown fluid by her nose. It wasn't blood. It was brown fluid, and I know what that probably means. So she was laying in the seats. We were getting close to landing. She woke up at one juncture and said, sit me up. And I said, just lay there. I'll sit you up when we're close. And I had told Kyle, I'll need your help to swing her around. So we did that. As we were getting close to touching down, I reached over her like this with my left hand, and I put my elbow and arm on her chest so she wouldn't lurch forward during the landing. And I was cupping her face, her cheek, with my left hand, and I put my forehead on her head, and I could feel her breath getting short. And I started to whisper in her ears, please stay with me. I love you. We're almost there, babe. And I could tell she was fading. And the plane touched down, and the pilot he taxied pretty fast, and he said, everybody please stay seated. We have a passenger who's going to need medical attention. And as soon as that door opened, those paramedics stormed in, and they asked me her name, and they started yelling, do this, do that. They put her, on the ground. They couldn't get a wheelchair in or anything. So I saw the readout when they put the pads on her chest, and I didn't see the line moving. It was a flat line, and I saw numbers, and I asked them, do you have anything? And he said, no. So they carried her out. Things were moving very fast, and the flight attendant came up to me, and he says, where's your bag? Where's your bag? And I have just a kind of a small carry-on bag that crimps at the top. And I grabbed it, and he ran, and he started jamming in water and snacks and napkins, and he was literally jamming it in the bag. And I turned to walk out of the plane, and then I stopped, and I had remembered that this lady had offered me all this stuff. And I turned around and I touched her arm and I said, thank you for your kindness. And as I was walking out of the plane, the cockpit door was open and the pilot was in there. And I said to the pilot, I'm her husband. And I pointed out to the door and I said, Kyle did an amazing job. And when I got outside, it was mayhem. There were police and paramedics, and a lady touched my arm and she said, my name is whatever. I work with Southwest and I'll be by your side the entire time. And if you need anything. And then I got a tap on my left shoulder and I turned and it was Kyle, the flight attendant. And he grabbed me in for a strong hug and he said, I'll pray for you. And then I received another tap. And I turned and was the pilot, and he came out and he hugged me too. I couldn't believe these people, in retrospect, the kindness from strangers. So now we're running down this busy airport. Dorothy's on the stretcher, and one of the paramedics is beside me, and he's going, do you have medical power of attorney? Do you have do not resuscitate? You want your wife to die in peace? I'll have to put her on a machine. And I'm like, I have that, but not with me. And I was calling Pete up, my son. You got to go in the office, son, and you got to get the documents. And he's like, well, Mom's going to be okay, right? I go, no, I need these documents so they don't put her on a machine. And my poor kid, I terrorized him. And we made it to the ambulance finally. It was right outside, like by the runway. There was like planes were right around there and everything. And they wheeled her into the ambulance to start CPR. And Pete was sending me pictures of documents. And one of the paramedics was reading the documents. It wasn't quite right. I needed a signature page. So we went back and forth 3 or 4 times. I didn't look into the ambulance too much as they were working on her, because I knew she was gone. This wasn't like a heart attack or anything like that. And there was nothing to be done. And there were 3 police officers there. There was a female and 2 males. And the female was the commander. And they were asking me a bunch of questions, and they were taking notes on their little pads. And I told them the whole story. And when I finished the story, the lady officer, she asked me if she could hug me. So now I'm 3 or 4 hugs into this journey. These people are hugging me and stuff. Such kindness in the world. I just, so everything kind of stopped. They had the right documents and they stopped working on her, and they didn't have to put her on a machine. And the officer came up to me, one of the 2 male officers, and he said, well, here's where we're at right now. So we called the medical examiner. They deemed her cause of death as natural causes. He's signed off a waiver, so the coroner's not coming. Nobody's coming to take your wife away, and now it's up to you. You have to decide what you're going to do. And I just took a deep breath. I'm like, okay, well, let me make a few calls real quick here. And the officer said that he was going to call the station and see if, they can devote some resources to getting me some information. One of my first calls was to Beata, the lady that came in the day before to treat Dorothy, and I told her she had passed, and she told me that she knew it was going to be likely that she wouldn't make it, but Dorothy came into her life for a reason, and she wanted to be there for her. I called up my brother-in-law, John, who's a pastor, and I said, Dorothy's passed. Please let the family know. She literally died in my arms on the plane, and I don't know if I'm supposed to fly her back or she can get cremated here and I'll come back and get her ashes or take her ashes, whatever. And John gave me some advice, and the cops came up to me then and they said, okay, we're going to put you in our office because we can't stay here. It's too busy and dangerous here. So we're going to move you to the other side of the airfield. You'll have an office for yourself, and we'll stay by your side the entire time. He said, don't worry, the ambulance will be right in your sight. Nothing's going to happen to your wife. She's going to stay with you until whatever you do, you have to do. So we moved to the other side of the airfield. There was a private office. This was the police headquarters in the airport. I was in a big conference room, and my phone was almost out of juice, so I plugged it in, and I set up shop on a countertop, and the officer had handed me a piece of paper, and he said, these are some credible funeral directors. To start with, I hope this helps. So I started making calls, and my phone was blowing up with text messages and stuff. The word was spreading fast. And I learned early on by talking to these funeral directors that there was no way that Dorothy's body, whether be cremated or I shipped her, flew back with her body, they weren't going to let that happen for at least a week because of the red tape and everybody who needs to sign off on stuff. So my mindset was, do I stay here and get a hotel and wait until she's ready to go? Or do I go home and come back and get her when she's ready to go? And I decided with the latter. I really wanted to get home. So I was still waiting for a call back from the one of the 4 funeral directors that I wanted to use. I wanted to interview each person first. And these people seemed nice, a husband and wife team. So I called home and I called Sam, my oldest son, and I asked him if he could call Southwest to see what would be involved in changing my return flight, because my return flight wasn't for 21 days. And I wanted to get home ASAP. So after I hung up the phone with Sam, one of the officers came up to me, and I was bonding with these guys too, because one of the things I always do is one of my superpowers, I guess, is connecting with people. So I was really connecting with these 2 guys. We had many discussions in the downtime. So this officer came up to me and he said, how do you spell your last name again? And he wrote it on his little pad. And then he left. He walked out. And I don't know, some time passed. And eventually he came back and he handed me a boarding pass. And the boarding pass was for 7:20 a.m. the next morning. And I couldn't believe that this officer did this for me. And, he said, I tried to get you on today, but the only flight available was 4 p.m. And I didn't think you would make that. These guys were awesome. They were asking me if, I wanted food, and they were just on top of me the whole time. So I get the call back from the funeral director that I want to use. She explains to me the process. They'll come pick her up, and it'll take about 90 minutes. She wanted me to come to the office to sign a contract, and I told her, absolutely not. I'm not leaving my wife. So I had explained to her that I would be staying overnight. Could I call her when I had the hotel secured, and maybe she could meet me there? And she agreed to that. And the whole time, the police were listening to my conversation, and when we arranged a pickup time, they whispered to me, you can't be picked up here. This is a secure airport. They won't let him in. So they were scrambling, and they were kind of yelling with each other where to go, where to meet, and they found a location for us to meet outside of the airport grounds. And I gave the lady the address. Another little piece of paper they handed off. So now all the plans are made. I have a flight back. We have about a 90-minute wait. And, I asked if I could go sit with my wife. So the police officer checked with the paramedic, and they said it was okay. And so I went down into the ambulance, and I pulled the cover off of my wife, and I saw that her wedding ring was not there. And So I immediately exited the ambulance and I told the paramedic, I said, my wife never took her ring off and there's no ring on her finger. And he assured me that nobody touched anything. So I looked at the police officer. I said, you better get ready to write a report then. And I wasn't mean about it. I was calm. But I went inside and I sat with her and, stroked her hair and her face and her hand and talked to her. All the while my phone was blowing up. It was crazy. Got a knock on the door. It was the police officer, and he said, can you come out here? I want to show you something. And he showed me the body cam and of the airplane, what happened, and Dorothy didn't have a ring on. And we know now, like, I'll finish up with why she didn't put her ring on, but I apologized to the paramedic, and I said, honestly, when I got home, if there was no ring, I would have called you and said there's no ring, or called you and told you there's a ring. In either case, I mean, I'm not pressing charges. It's a ring, and I have more problems than that. So, I waited. The time came for us to meet the funeral director. So we drove outside the airport. I was in the police car. And by the way, that lady from Southwest who said, I'll be by your side, she wound up getting my bag because we had one suitcase. So all of my stuff was with me. And by the way, I had consumed all of the beverages that flight attendant gave me. It was a godsend, and maybe literally a godsend. So now they take Dorothy's body off of the stretcher from the ambulance and put her on the stretcher to the funeral car. And I'm walking with her as they're loading them up. And at one juncture, the officer asked me if I was okay. And then they loaded her up and they drove away. So now it's me and the officer standing there in the street. And I asked him about hotels. I said, there's a hotel nearby. I mean, I got to find a place to stay. And he said, there's a lot of hotels, but he recommended one. And he said, they have a shuttle to the airport. And I asked him if he could drive me. And the guy drove me. Now, this entire time, I was bonding with these officers, but this gentleman in particular, he was from the Bronx. He was Italian. I mean, this guy could have been right out of my own family tree. We've talked about everything, how difficult it is to be a police officer in these days, and, recipes, everything like that. Like I said, I really bonded with these guys. So the officer dropped me off at the hotel, and I thanked him again, and I told him if he ever needed anything, he had my information. He had given me his phone number to let him know when the funeral car was here. So I had his phone number in my phone, and he had my information. So I got the hotel room. The people from the funeral home did meet me, and they were nice. That worked out. And then I was hungry and tired. I grabbed a couple sandwiches at Starbucks in the hotel. I gobbled them up. I wanted to start writing because I take my journal whenever I travel, and I wanted to document everything from Friday morning, when she went to the doctor, till like this present moment in time, because I didn't want to forget it, and I wanted it to be fresh in my mind, and I wanted to memorialize everything that had just happened, but I was too tired. So the next morning, in this story, just more kindness is coming. I took a 5:30 a.m. shuttle to the airport. The flight was at 7:20. When I walked in the doors of the airport, they had a super long line going right and a super long line going left. And by super long, I mean there were hundreds of people in line. I asked the first person I could see, a young lady. I asked, what is going on here? And she said, well, this line is to check your bag in, and this line is the TSA line. And she said, you got to start over there. And she pointed to the end of the line, which she had wrapped around the baggage carousel. So, I mean, it could have been up to 300 people. I would say it was at least 200 people. So I got at the end of the line and I looked at my watch and I said, well, I got about an hour and 40 minutes. I hope I make my flight. So I got to the end of the line and over the PA system, a Southwest person came on and said, if you're flying Southwest, the lines are long because today's a holiday and today veterans and service people fly for free, but the lines are moving fast. Have your stuff ready to go. So that's what was with the lines. The guy right in front of me in line, he had a rifle case. And again, my superpower of sharing life with people and making friends with strangers, I just started a conversation with him and we started talking about rifles and hunting, and we got into all kinds of deep discussion. And then he asked me why I was traveling. And I said, do you want to hear a sad story? And he said, yeah. And I told him the quick story and he dropped everything and he hugged me. So now how many hugs am I in with these strangers was unbelievable. I got to the kiosk to print up my bag tag. And when I printed it up, the Southwest guy said, you should have come directly to these kiosks. This line here is to actually take your bag and put it on the scale. You have to go back to the end of the line. And I was like, what? And I looked and the line hadn't diminished at all. And I thought, now I'm not going to make my flight. So the first, I looked at the line, the people closest to me was a young couple. And I had asked the young couple, is it okay if I cut in line with you here? I'm in dire straits. I got to make a flight home. And they go, well, it's all right with us if it's all right with her. And they point to the lady behind her. Lady was middle-aged. She probably is around my age. And she had a real, crappy look on her face. And she looked at me and she had just heard what I said and she didn't say anything. She could have said, yeah, come on in or whatever. So I said, is it okay? It's okay with them. Is it okay if I could jump in line here? I said, yesterday, my wife literally died on the airplane coming here. We were going to a cancer center and I have to get back home. And the lady looked at me and she said, well, my daughter's in a mental institution and I got my own problems, or we all have our own problems, is what she said. And I don't remember what I said to her. I was pleading with her and she's like, fine, fine. So I got in line and it saved me the time. And now I got in the other line going the other way, which was the TSA line. And then that lady pulled up right behind me because we were together and then we're still together. And it occurred to me that maybe she didn't believe my story. So I felt compelled to tell her a little bit more. At first, I thanked her again. And then I said, here's what happened. And I could tell that the lady probably didn't believe me when I told her before. And now she did believe me. So after I finished that, I said to her, so what's the deal with your daughter? And she said, I have two daughters. One is 20 and one is 30. My 20-year-old, she's always lacked self-confidence and she's been really down on herself. And she tried to commit suicide and they locked her up. She doesn't know that I know. I wasn't supposed to know, but my older daughter told me. And, I'm flying in to go see her if I can, and told me her whole life story. So after she told me the story about her daughter, I reached into my pocket and I grabbed a business card and I said, here's my information. I have a dear friend named Sarah Goggin. I told her she's a badass female warrior. She's a life coach, and she was where your daughter is at when she was your daughter's age. And she's not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. She will empower your daughter and she will make your daughter a powerful warrior. And I said, email me or call me and I'll give you her information and she will take great care of your daughter. And then we got to the terminal and we made a little small talk. And then we got to the terminal on time. So not only did the police officer get me the boarding pass, he got me the boarding pass in the first boarding group. So I was on the plane right away. And all I could think about was, I wanted to write. I wanted to get my journal going so I could get all this stuff written down and memorialize it. So I sat down by the escape doors because I always wanted to be that guy who would be helping people off a plane if it crashed. And I'd never really gotten to ever sit there. And I was going through the scenario in my head, like, hey, I'm finally sitting in the seat that I want. And then the flight attendant came on the PA and he said, is there a Frank L on the plane? Frank L. And I'm raising my hand and he didn't hear me. So somebody said, hit the button. So I hit the call button. And this guy starts wading through all the people that were loading on the plane. And I was thinking, oh, great. The cop probably messed up my reservation and they're going to kick me off the plane. And I started going into the problem-solving mode, like, all right, well, how many hours will I be at the airport? I have to call up Joe to tell him I'm not going to be there then, and the new flight is this and that. And I was just going through these revolutions in my head. And the guy finally got up to me, the flight attendant. And he said to me, he grabbed my hand, like he grabbed my hand in a handshake, but he had his other hand around the back of my hand. And he said, Frank, I was on the plane with you yesterday. And he said, I'm so sorry, and I just want you to know I'll be praying for you. And he hugged me. It was unbelievable. So the plane took off. I wrote for 4 straight hours. I did not stop writing. Well, I did a few times. I stopped to wipe tears away, but it was the fastest 4 hours of my life. And when I was exiting the plane, there was a flight attendant. She was middle-aged Asian lady. She was I don't even know if she was 5 feet tall. And she asked me, are you Frank? And I said, yes. And she said, can I hug you? And she hugged me. I got to the luggage carousel. There was only one person standing there. Who was it? It was that lady who let me in line. I made a beeline for her and I said, how's it going? And she lit up. She had a smile on her face and she said, my daughter knows I'm here. She wants to see me. I'm going to go right there from here. And I gave her the bouncing finger. I said, don't you forget about Sarah Goggin. Please email me or call me. And she goes, I will. And she hugged me. So when I told you at the beginning of this podcast, a lot of divine things lined up. Those hugs and all of those people showing kindness to me, that was part of it. Another part of it was, Dorothy had no pain. Her MRI said innumerable tumors. Innumerable means too many to count. And they were big tumors, 1 to 2 centimeters. And she didn't have any pain, which is amazing. She had discomfort. She felt she was bloated, and that was her word. I just feel bloated and uncomfortable, but she didn't have any pain, which leads me to think there's been some divine intervention here. We had all these people handling us and taking care of us, and all the support from her friends. It was unbelievable what everybody did for us prior to us going. She was getting text messages, hundreds of text messages, and she, at one juncture, after everybody left, she said to me, man, I really feel the love. And I go, well, apparently people really like you. I don't know why, but, we had a little laugh about that. So now comes some other interesting things, because I looked at this whole amazing ride that we just took, and Dorothy didn't feel any pain. And how did I frame this out in a way that it would be positive? And here's what I came up with. Dorothy knew, she said it in the hospital, we're in a fight and we'll do what we have to do. And she was brave. She was so tired, especially Monday morning when we got it, or Tuesday morning, I'm sorry, when we got on the plane. And I look at it like this. She was in a battle. As soon as she found out about the cancer and the stage 4, she put on her suit of armor and she grabbed a sword and she said, all right, I'm going to battle with my enemy now. And she stayed in that battle. And in her last ditch effort, she charged the line, which was her being on the plane, landing on the ground where they were going to take us to the cancer clinic. She pushed herself all the way to the end. And that, my friends, is the way a true warrior goes out. And it's tragic that we lost her. Very crappy in every way, but the way that she went out on her own terms, and she went out courageous and brave. And I'm very proud of her. I hope that I go out when it's my time, like she did, brave and courageous, a warrior fighting to the end. So that's how I frame that out. But many other amazing things have happened as a result of this. It was like a big karmic explosion of light. I had 2 friends walk out of my life several years ago over something stupid. It was ridiculous. And both of those friends called me. One of my friends told me that, he said, you never knew this, but I tried to pattern myself after you on the trading floor. You were my idol. And the other guy said similar things, like she brought us together. Her death brought us together. Also interesting and very, I don't know if enriching's the correct word, but it's enlightening for sure. 3 people were particularly on me the whole time, concerned for me. Are you okay? What can I do for you? And these 3 men, these important men in my life, they all shared the same commonality. They all lost a child. And that, to me, my friends, is the worst pain. And they were particularly conscious of what I was going through. And I told each one of these men in separate conversations that I always kept their loss fresh in my mind, because that loss gives me perspective, like what the real hardship people could go through when they grieve has to be the worst is when you lose a child. And these 3 men, they were overly on top of me, concerned for me. And I think that's because they know the true spirit of deep-seated pain. And my friends, Jimmy, Eric, and Vince, you guys know who you are. It meant so much to me that you guys did that for me. You'll never know how much that means to me. And I will never forget your loss and your children that you lost. I have written about them in my journal and memorialized them. I will never forget them. And then just a greater awareness came of this whole thing for me, because I'm all about the warrior creed and the warrior mindset. And I've tried to live my life as a warrior, to be courageous and strong and brave. And for that reason, I have had many strong warriors come into my life, and they surround me. Kevin and Andy, Joe, Tommy, Phil. I mean, Andy told me he would basically drop to his knees when I texted him the news. And it's like, with this warrior round table that I call it, we're bonded so tightly together that when one bleeds, we all bleed. It's like we're one living creature together. And it just reminded me of how blessed I am to have my warrior brothers and sisters so tightly wound to me, and the strength of family and friends. I mean, holy cow. Dorothy's friends and her whole family, everybody came. It was amazing. And that's part of the blessing in there, is that she got to see everybody. So I'm going to share a couple little side stories with you. When we first got home, from the hospital, waiting to get to Hope for Cancer, my oldest son, Sam, came in my office and he said, "Dad, could I talk to you?" And he closed the door and he just reached into his pocket and he took out a big stack of money and he threw it on the desk. And he was teary eyed and he said, "Dad, uh, I know this is going to cost you a lot of money." And he said, "Everything that I have, my wife, my kids, my job, my life is because of you and Mom. And I wanted to help you out." And I got up, I just started bawling and I grabbed him and I'm kissing him. And I was like, "I'm so proud of you, son." And I was like, "Sam, how much money is that? That's a lot of money." And he told me, and it was a lot of money. Um, I said, "I'm doing okay, son. I'm fine with money and I can afford it, but I'm going to keep the money um, in case I need it." And I put it in the safe right in front of him. And I said, "I'm so proud of you." I go, "But don't get mad at me if I don't need the money. I'll give it back to you. Don't get mad at me if I do that. But if I need it, I'll use it." And that was a story that I wanted to share. I told my wife that, and she was so proud. She's like, "He gets it. Our boy gets it, you know?" And our other sons were so attentive and, just checking with their mom, getting her stuff, talking with her. Like my sons they really stepped up, and I'm just so proud of them. Um, it was interesting when I got to my computer for the first time. We had a room full of people, and I had to make arrangements and stuff. This is prior to us leaving for Hope for Cancer when we were having all the visitors. I'm sorry, I messed that up. This is after I got home, and Dorothy had passed. And when I finally got to the computer, there was the first thing that popped out of to my eyes was the survey for Southwest. And I go out loud, I go, "Oh yeah, I'm going to give you a survey. Here we go." And I wrote like over 1,000 words of what the experience and all the hugs and all the love I got. And I put at the end, I said, "And if you ever need a national spokesperson for Southwest Airlines, I'll do your commercials for free." And I meant that. I hope they get the survey. I did also print it, and I'm going to send it via mail because I want to make sure they know how this whole company embraced us. It was unbelievable. And then it occurred to me that I never got that officer's name, the man who helped me, and I wanted to thank him again, and I wanted to write a letter to his superiors about what he did for me. And I had his number in my phone. So a couple days after I got home, I texted him and I said, "This is Frank Lardino. You helped me with that whole thing, and I want to write a letter. I never got your name, and I want to write a letter to your superiors." And he texted me back right away. He goes, "You don't have to do that. I don't want you to do that." And I said, "No, I want to do that. Please." And he sent me his name, and then he sent me, attention to and the address of the police department. So I wrote the following letter, which I want to share with you. It says, "Dear Sergeant McMasters, I wanted to take the time to write to you about a harrowing experience that I had on January 2nd, 2024, and what Officer Steve Velge did for me. I was flying with my wife, Dorothy, from Chicago to San Diego. Dorothy had been recently diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She was in really bad shape. We were flying to San Diego, and we were going to be picked up by a driver to take us to Hope for Cancer in Tijuana. During the 4-hour flight, my wife was becoming progressively weaker, and I had asked that the EMTs be ready when we landed. It was a terrible flight for my wife, and she could not get comfortable. All the while, she was getting weaker and weaker. As we were landing, I had my arm across her chest and cupped her cheek in my hand to keep her stable through the braking of the aircraft. I put my forehead on her cheek, and as we were touching down, I could tell she was fading. I kept speaking in her ear to stay with me. I loved her and to hang on. We landed and the EMTs stormed in. They could not get a pulse and they carried her out of the plane. I grabbed my stuff and followed the ambulance. I grabbed my stuff and followed to the ambulance. It was mayhem. They worked on her in the ambulance, but she was gone. There were 3 officers that I remember that were asking me questions and taking notes. One was a female officer, and she asked me if she could hug me. If you find out who that officer was, please extend my sincere gratitude. And that moment in my life, that hug was powerful. I did not get the name of the other officer, but both he and Officer Veldy stayed with me the whole time. They moved me to a different location and a police office where I was given a conference room. I was informed that my wife's body would not be picked up by the county coroner and that it was up to me what to do with her. Your 2 officers procured a list of 4 funeral homes to call, which was extremely helpful in these stressful minutes and hours. While I was making the calls, the officers were offering help, asking me if I wanted lunch, and stood by me the entire time. At one juncture, I called my son back in Chicago and asked him to call Southwest to see what would be involved for me to change my reservation home. We were supposed to be at the cancer clinic for 21 days, and I wanted to get home ASAP. After I got off the phone, Officer Velgy asked me when I wanted to fly back, and I told him as quickly as possible. He left the room. Shortly after, he came back with a boarding pass for a 7:20 a.m. flight the next morning. He said he could have gotten me one on a 4 p.m. flight that day, but thought I wouldn't make the flight, and he was right. I could not believe what this officer had just done for me. Within 2 hours, it was time to meet the undertaker to take my wife's body. Both officers had coordinated a perfect location while I was on the phone with the funeral director. Officer Velgy drove me in the police cruiser with the ambulance following us. We had a personal conversation about people we lost from cancer. I felt that I had built a real bond with this man. As they were loading my wife into the funeral car, Officer Velgy asked me if I was okay. I appreciated that. When the car pulled away, it was the 2 of us standing there. I asked him where he recommended I stay for the night. He suggested a hotel and drove me there. When I got out of the car, I shook his hand and I thanked him. What he and the other officers did for me was absolutely astounding. I don't know what I would have done without them. I wanted to tell you how grateful that I am for all these officers and what they did for me, especially Officer Velgy. And I finish with this. I want you and all your people to know this. I am a conceal and carry card holder. If I ever saw a police officer in distress, I would fight side by side with them at the risk of my own life. Police officers see the worst of humanity every single day. You carry very dark storms in your heads that no civilians can even comprehend. My sincerest gratitude goes out to your whole team who helped me through the worst minutes of my life. They give me hope for humanity. God bless you all. And I mailed that letter a couple days ago. I'm going to check in with him to make sure they got it. I want him to definitely read that letter. And that, my friends, is the story in the best detail I could tell. I wanted to have a video record of this for my family and my friends and everybody who wants to know the story. Dorothy Huizinga Lardino, she went out like a true warrior. You know, I grieve more for myself and my family and friends than for her because she's in a better place now and she went out fighting. And I think that is the best way we can all go out. I love you all. Thank you for watching this. If I were to share anything else with you, I would tell you life is short, my friends. It doesn't even matter how long you live. You could live to be 100. And if you ask a 100-year-old person, did it seem like a long time? They would tell you, no, it flew by. Life is flying by. Every minute that we live is precious. Every relationship that we have is precious. And we don't have the time to be angry and hateful and resentful and unforgiving. Like, that stuff is all nonsense. We have each other. We have the ability to be kind to each other. Look at all the kindness that was given to me. It was unbelievable. So I'm always conscious about being kind, and now I will accelerate that. I will be more conscious to be kind to others, pay attention to others, because each other is all we have, guys. We are going to have a memorial service for her on February 3rd, followed by a party. She wanted a party. We're going to have a DJ and play all of her favorite songs. We're going to eat and drink. We're going to celebrate her life, what she deserved. And I just wanted to show you a couple pictures that are some of my favorite. This picture here, this is her and I in 1984 on New Year's Day. Well, it's New Year's Eve into New Year's Day, and she's holding a can of beer, and I'm hiding the beer. So from the picture taker, because she was a good girl, and I didn't want anyone to see the beer, and it was kind of funny. And this is my favorite picture of all time, of all pictures that I have ever seen. This is Dorothy sitting with my grandma and my dog, the dog I grew up with. Sorry about the reflections. Let me get this thing centered here. This little moment in time, it's so meaningful to me. I have this sitting in front of me all the time on my desk, and I've had it for years. It's just something that I really love. And then in the background, I'll see if I can get my finger here. This picture right here, that picture is on our honeymoon. And I'm telling you, my friends, and I will tell this story later on. Maybe I'll do it at the memorial service. When I met my wife, or I don't even say met her, when I first saw her, she was absolutely the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. And I always felt that for her, no matter what. We did beef about something, and, I would just tell her I was lucky. I don't know how I closed that deal, but man, she was so beautiful, and inside and out, and I will miss her. And a little part of me died with her that I'll never get back. So thank you for joining me today, everyone. I love you all. Life is fleeting, my friends. Please make the best of it. Be grateful and be kind. I love you all. See you again.